My name is Dave Catlin, and I'm going to be your host for this and for future Natural Start webinars. And I'm coming to you today from Springfield, Missouri. We've got people participating in this who are all over the country, and I'm sure that goes for those of you who are on the listening end and watching end as well. I wanted to start with a couple of brief comments first about how this is going to work today. Most of you probably have been on webinars before, and this is not substantially different, but just so that you know. First of all, as I mentioned a couple of times to those who were on early, everybody who is a participant is on mute automatically. We've got a big group, and that way that automatically eliminates the background noise that you might get otherwise unintentionally. You will, however, notice that in the upper left-hand part of your screen, there's a chat button. And that's how, if you need to communicate with us, that's how you'll be able to do it. And you'll notice if you go to that you can communicate with everybody, you can communicate with the panel, you can select whom it is that you want to communicate with. And we're going to use the chat function for questions as well. We've got a big enough group that we're going to hold or ask you, well, let me put it this way, that we're going to deal with and answer questions at the end of the presentation. You don't necessarily have to hold your questions that long. If you have a question you're afraid you're going to forget, you're welcome to go ahead and type it into the chat box whenever it occurs to you, and we'll keep track of it. And when we get to the question and answer period at the end, we will at that time answer as many of them as we have time for. I will also tell you that the session is being recorded. And so that means that you will have an opportunity, if you want, to revisit it. It also means that you don't necessarily have to write down all the bullet points that interest you or the web addresses and that sort of thing that appear. You'll be able to go back and get that later. So again, the session is being recorded, and you will be emailed the URL that will give you the access to that recording. Well, early childhood STEM is an important and it's a timely topic. Just last Friday, CBS News ran a story headlined, "Think Big, Start Early, New Effort to Close Gender Gap in Science Starts in Preschool." So clearly this is a cutting edge topic for those of us who are working in early childhood education. And as it happens, our presenters today are no strangers to media attention themselves. Their groundbreaking work in co-founding and directing Fiddleheads Forest School at the University of Washington Arboretum has been covered by the New York Times, Education Week, and several other major media outlets. They're going to be telling you more of their story. It'll be included and kind of woven into the presentation they're about to give. But at the moment, I would like to just wrap up my part of the introduction and to say that we feel very fortunate to have with us from Seattle today, Sarah Heller and Kit Harrington. So Sarah and Kit, you can take it away.
Thanks, David.
Morning.
This is Sarah.
And this is Kit.
We're really excited to be here. Thanks for joining us on this presentation on early childhood STEM. We're going to be talking about using nature to drive learning, STEM, through a nature lens. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. You might also encounter the acronym STEAM at times, and the A stands for arts in this learning process. So my name is Sarah Heller, and along with Kit here, we founded Fiddleheads Forest School here in Seattle, Washington. I am a born and raised Seattleite, which is rare these days. I got my roots in nature connection by spending every free moment as a child and teenager exploring the Washington forests here, the beaches, and the mountains. I've been an environmental educator for over a decade and have worked here at the University of Washington Botanic Gardens for 6 years, developing and starting programs to connect kids to the natural world. I'd always dreamed of opening a school, and then I met Kit, and together we built Fiddleheads.
So, as Sarah said, my name is Kit, and I grew up in the Northeast in Vermont, and that's sort of where I fell in love with the natural world, and studied child development and perceptual development before moving out to Seattle, where I continued my studies in Montessori early childhood education. And I moved here about 8 years ago, and maybe 4 or 5 years ago was getting ready to head back to the East Coast when I met Sarah and fell in love with this concept of taking a lot of the educational experiences I've been doing indoors and outdoors and really fully committing to it by opening a forest school. And we sort of there built Fiddleheads from the ground up and never looked back. So.
And to give you a little background on Fiddleheads, we've been open 4.5 years, and we're located in the Washington Park Arboretum, which is part of the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. The Arboretum also happens to be a Seattle City park, just to complicate things a little bit further. Fiddleheads is an entirely outdoor, nature-based preschool that operates 4 hours a day with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. We have a strong emphasis on social-emotional learning, executive functioning, and natural sciences, all in a student-led, play-based environment. Today, for this webinar, we're going to give you guys an overview of STEM. We're going to tell a few stories, one about a teeter-totter and one about a wonder adventure. And then we're going to give some tips and tricks for incorporating STEM into your own educational setting. We're going to reflect on some of the sort of high-end ideas that we've covered, and then we're going to have some time at the end for your questions. And you can expect a lot of stories and pictures of kids in the woods.
Okay, we've just launched the first of a couple of polls that we're going to invite you guys to respond to. And take just a moment and go ahead and answer this first question that Kit and Sarah have posed to you. And it looks like a lot of people are responding. The number's going up pretty rapidly here. I'm going to give you just another 10 seconds or so to get your comments in. Wait for that number to slow down a little bit. We've gotten almost everybody to respond. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and give you an opportunity to see it. Kit and Sarah, can you guys see that on your screen?
We can.
Yeah.
So I'll let you interpret it.
So it seems like the majority of the participants on this webinar are most comfortable teaching science, which is not a surprise from our end. And so we'll be excited to cover some aspects of technology, engineering, and math that might be new and interesting and hopefully make those areas feel more accessible to you in your classrooms.
I think the great thing about STEM is the way in which those other elements of technology, engineering, and math really become integrated into the whole process. So for those of us who don't feel like our strengths necessarily lie in those areas, we're able to still attend to all of these things just through this really integrated process of STEM learning.
I'll go ahead and close this screen then.
Oh, no, we have one more. David, there you go.
Yeah, so this is the follow-up question. And we ask everybody who just...
It's actually the same question.
Oh, it is the same question. Would have been interesting to see how differently we got answers. Okay, here's the second question. So again, I'll give just a few seconds to tell us which domain of STEM are you least comfortable implementing in your classroom. And by classroom here, Kit and Sarah are mean indoors and out, or whatever your setting is for teaching.
Correct. Indoor, outdoor, any combination of the two.
Okay, and again, we've just about got most everybody. I'll give it just another second or two here. And once again, show you the results.
All right, it looks like about half of you feel the least comfortable with technology, and about 40% feel least comfortable with engineering, followed by math. So that is good to know for what we'll focus on in this webinar today. So, and I can see how technology would be, especially in an outdoor setting, might be challenging. All right. Okay, so why STEM? First and foremost, we believe that STEM is really important for keeping wonder alive in children. I'm a newish mom to Finn, who is 6 months, and of course I'm seeing the world through his eyes every day. There's nothing that beats watching the wonder of a baby as he explores the simplest things. Stacking cups are his current go-to, providing endless exploration. He tastes them, bangs them on his leg, hits them together, tosses them. He's exploring completely unhindered to find out what he and these cups can do. People are born wondering, and if we can keep that wonder alive, we will have citizens of this world who want to know and understand, ask questions, solve problems, reflect, and improve on their discoveries. That uninterrupted, open-ended exploration is how kids discover the world. NIAC, or NICE, depending on where you live in the country, says that research shows that the earlier we can guide and support children's wonder about the world, and thereby identify opportunities for children to acquire foundational STEM skills, the more successful they are in all areas of learning later on. That leads to the next reason for STEM. There's a lot of research out there that points to kids who are exposed to STEM learning and STEM concepts in early childhood find future success in their lives. There's greater college attendance, higher test scores, higher salaries, more students, both male and female, entering careers in science, engineering, mathematics. And third here is the connection to development. STEM learning can be developmentally appropriate, and it can also support the healthy development of children. So it goes both ways. STEM can be the hook to drive development, physical, social, emotional, and cognitive. For example, at Fiddleheads, every spring, the kids are interested in bees. This is a natural development from seeing the flowers burst out of their buds and watching those bees fly back and forth from flower to flower. We have a book, a Magic School Bus book, all about bees, and they want to read that book over and over and over because it is rich with detail about the life of a bee. This inspires them as the kids to become a colony of bees. They adopt roles to keep the hive alive, and in this process, the kids are building their hive, they're developing. They haul logs and sticks across the forest to their chosen hive location. They might take paintbrushes or sticks to nearby flowers to collect pollen, which is manipulating a fine tool carefully between the flowers to move that pollen around. Socially, they're collaborating and working together to navigate the play landscape, adopting a role, whether it's the queen bee or a worker bee, and they have to sustain that role. Sustaining that role for a long period of time supports cognitive development. And then through the trial and error of building a hive or finding ways to collect pollen, the kids are working on emotional regulation. Being successful at complex tasks and persevering through the trial and error that many STEM experiences require builds and cements emotional regulation and builds that emotional awareness of oneself and others that allows them to be successful. What is STEM? So STEM is inquiry. It's a way of approaching learning that can be applied in any setting. It's asking questions, wondering about the world around us. This gets kids excited and headed down the road towards science and technology and engineering and math. STEM is exploration, using our 5 senses to explore the world, having extended open-ended time to approach our surroundings with curiosity and to wonder, observe, to encounter the mysteries and phenomena in the world around us. Through these explorations, kids will ask questions and wonder about what they're experiencing. A walk becomes an adventure. Instead of just moving through the forest and the environment they're in, they're using their senses, they're slowing down, they're noticing, they're observing. Play, open-ended, free play, segues really smoothly into STEM learning by letting children take the lead in exploring and ask open-ended questions that cause children to reflect on theories, ideas, ask questions, continue, and further their explorations. STEM is student-led, so if they are wandering and wondering and asking questions, then they are generating their own excitement, their own energy, their own motivation to continue to learn more, gather information, ask further questions, and stay focused on the topic at hand. STEM involves specific language that the teachers can use to inspire open-ended questions and model science words and language that furthers the learning and helps them make those connections and be able to use those words to help them make sense of what they are experiencing in the world around them. There was a Natural Start Alliance article published a little while ago addressing STEM in nature-based early childhood settings. And there's a quote that I think really highlights what STEM is all about. STEM is a way of thinking about how educators at all levels, including parents, should be helping students integrate knowledge across disciplines, encouraging them to think in a more connected and holistic way. So we don't see STEM as only these separate categories of science, technology, engineering, and math. We are always finding ways to integrate all of these ideas into the direct experience that the kids are having at Fiddleheads. So with that, we are going to talk about each area of STEM, dive a little more in depth. I'm going to sort of stay briefly on this slide since it seems like most of you are comfortable with science, but we sort of see science as this is the point in time where we're asking questions, making a plan, investigating, experimenting, modeling, describing, using the scientific method. Rachel Larimore shared with me a document that was made by the National Research Council on creating a framework for science education. And this image here on practices for K-12 science classrooms can be used all the way up through high school, but can also be used all the way down through preschool. And so this image on the right is interesting. The student is standing over our mud pit, and he or she has found 2 different kinds of soil in this mud pit. And this child was wondering why do these soils look different? How could they be this way? Why are they like this? So that's that period of asking questions. And then this student can plan and carry out investigations to find out if they can recreate this soil, if they can find this soil elsewhere in the classroom. Is it water that makes the soil different colors? So they could set up 2 bins with soil and not to the other. They could leave it out overnight, leave it in the sun, figure out if they can find what makes this soil different. So I'm going to move to, and then technology. Technology always seems to be a question, and on that survey it definitely came up as one that people seem to be the least comfortable with. Do computers and technology count? Are they relevant in an early childhood setting? At Fiddleheads, we look at technology as broader than just digital, but it can certainly be inclusive of digital technology. Technology for us is tools in the environment. Some are brought in by the teachers, but mostly we encourage the students to make tools with the materials that are available at hand in the forest. For art, we often use sticks to paint with, or we use leaves as palettes to paint on. We might use tool to determine the length of a log or an animal trail or an animal track. At Fiddleheads, we also have some digital technology, and a student is generally limited to having a bird call machine or bird sound machine to play the sounds we hear in the forest. We also have waterproof speakers so that we can bring in music into the forest, and we use a digital camera to document the kids' experiences, both for themselves and for their families and their parents. We also have science tools that we bring into the classroom, a microscope, a scale, magnifying glasses, tweezers, those kinds of things. We see that as technology. These might not fall under digital technology, but they are tools that can be manipulated to further the learning experiences these students are having. And at a school with indoor facilities, access to a computer, iPads, or tablets can certainly play a role in STEM as long as there are clear guidelines and expectations and they're used alongside a teacher. NIAC is a great resource for finding creative ways to incorporate technology into the early childhood classroom. Some ideas on how to incorporate technology in is definitely a camera, using a digital camera to document the work of students, whether it be artwork, things they've built, things that they won't be able to keep or take home. Use that to take pictures and then hang those up in the classroom or send them home with the students so that they have evidence of the work that they've done. You can use a video camera to tape the dramatic play that students are participating in and then play it back to students and be able to have conversations about the interactions with the kind of play that they're having. Technology can also be appropriate in situations where you're working with students with special needs or developmental delays in order to support their learning, whether that be indoors or outdoors. You can also use digital technology like a camera or video camera to do active storytelling with children. They can create books with photos that they've taken. You could use an audio recorder to record the stories that children tell. These are all ways to incorporate technology into whether you're an indoor or an outdoor classroom. And engineering. So this is, these photos here you can see our students were inspired by some sightings and experiences they had with coyotes in the Arboretum to build a coyote den. First they found tracks, and then there was a flood of questions. Where do these coyotes sleep? Where are they now? Is there more than one? What do they eat? So that wonder and curiosity was so alive in them. They were so motivated because they had made this discovery and they had an idea. They wanted to build a den, so they had to make a plan. How do we build a den that we can all fit in? What does a den look like? Is it above ground, underground? Do we build it with sticks or dirt or what? And then they had to make a plan. They had to pick something and go with it. They had to decide, okay, we're going to use sticks. Maybe we'll use some string. This looks like a good spot to build a den. So there was the wonder, the curiosity, the brainstorming, the narrowing of the idea, and then the building and figuring out the materials and modifying their design, making sure it doesn't fall over. Is it strong enough that if I climb in and out of this, it isn't going to fall over? And a teacher can help guide this process, watch it happen naturally, or step in to help them hone their thinking, to help them broaden their ideas, to help them really problem solve along the way. And so this process is the same as adult engineers go through when building a bridge or a skyscraper. They ask questions, they imagine and brainstorm, they come up with a plan, they build, and then they evaluate and improve their plans. And our early learners can do that too. And we see this again and again. Something in nature that inspires kids to do engineering projects and is often tied in social dramatic play and helps kids make sense of the phenomena that they are learning about or experiencing. But it's still engineering. And then math, another one that I think is a subject that can be feel difficult to access in the realm of STEM. But math is where we make sense of our discoveries and we interpret our findings. It can be a really useful tool along in the learning process, or it can be a really useful tool as part of, at the end, sort of figuring out what did we find out? What does this mean? What does it look like? You can see on the left here, there's a student, Remy. He's collected a number of leaves from our tulip trees in the magnolia grove here at Fiddleheads, and he is making a pattern out of these leaves. Patterns with size, colors, shapes, numbers, those all support pre-math skills. And this was something he was motivated to do based on the materials that were around him and in the forest. On the right, you can see me with a group of students. That's our tree, they named it Eek. Right outside our classroom. And this is a tree we did basically a phenology study of. We watched and observed this tree all year for a year. We watched it lose its leaves in the fall. We watched it grow a giant bud in the winter. And then in the spring, we watched it grow all the leaves bust out of that bud. And we would go and count those leaves to find out how many leaves does this tree have today? Does it have more leaves today? Are there less leaves? And all of that is those kids felt connected and interested in that tree. They wondered about it. They asked questions about it and wanted to go on adventures and visit that tree. So their connection is what motivated that opportunity to incorporate math into their relationship with that tree. So finding ways to measure in nature there's a lot of different things you can do. There's the non-standard measurement can connect kids to the concept of size and amounts, like finding a tree and wondering how many arms does it take to go around that tree. The kids will connect with the tree, feel its bark. Inevitably, someone will discover an amazing mystery on the tree while they're waiting for their friends to get in position. All right, so this is a diagram from a paper written by Karen Worth. And it really illustrates the inquiry process that happens in our early learners. And I'm going to use this image to help tell a story about a group of students at Fiddleheads. So the first part we're going to do is really going to be covering this noticing, this wondering, this asking questions piece of things. So the example I'm going to use is a teeter-totter. You can see here on the right, there's an image of some of our students building a teeter-totter here, and so inevitably every year at Fiddleheads somebody builds a teeter-totter, and often it's multiple times a year, and this can easily become a STEM learning opportunity. The kids bring the energy and excitement to explore their phenomena of how their bodies move, how it feels to be moving up and down on a teeter-totter. And you can build a bridge to the STEM concepts through the specific language, the questions that are asked, and then how you document the process. So the story starts with Mika, Pax, and Carter. You can see me standing on one log together going, Pax, you stand there. Whoa, it's hard to stay on. Whee! Oh no, I fell off. And then there's Carter over there being, hey, look, guys, I can balance on the log all by myself. The beginning of this process is filled with loud excitement, big movements, teetering back and forth, standing, sitting, cheering, and yelling about all their fun. A teacher can sit back and observe at this point, point out what he or she is seeing. You might be able to help give them some language for what they're feeling and what they're experiencing with their bodies. Wow, you're down on the ground. That looks like that your side is heavier. That side might weigh more or weigh less. Wow, you have it balanced. You're both in the air. Both sides are equal. All of that is language that is helping those students build an awareness of what is. And along the way, teachers can take pictures and be able to show that back to the students so they're able to see what they're experiencing. So that's that first piece, the noticing, the wonder, the exploring, their big body movements. They're asking questions. What happens if you move there? What happens if I move there? What happens if we put teacher Sarah on this side of the log and we all pile onto this side? What happens if we move this board back and forth? That's that exploring. But then inevitably, they start to hone in a little bit more, asking some questions and begin the phase of experimenting. They're making predictions. What happens if Clay sits on this side and Henry sits on that side? What do you think might happen? What if we put Ava on that side with Clay? Will that side go up? Will that side go down? Place where a teacher might step in and help them guide some of this process and making predictions and thinking through their thoughts before diving in to the trying it out. You can make a game of it, make it fun for the kids. You could even incorporate drawing pictures and making a chart, drawing little diagrams of a teeter-totter. What happens if you put 2 kids here and 3 kids on that side? What if you put a teacher on this side and kids on this side? What if you drag the board all the way over to one side so one side is longer and one side is shorter? How does that impact your ability to balance and make the board equal on both sides? So encourage them to think about as many things as they can. Use all of their senses. Grab a stick, measure the distance underneath each side of the board. And then in experimenting, in this phase of experimenting, encourage them to use all of their senses. With a teeter-totter, you're pretty much using your touch, your sense of sight to observe what's happening around them, noticing the changes and how the different students impact the teeter-totter and what's happening. And then after they've been able to test out all their ideas, you've been able to document some by writing them down or taking pictures that you can review. Next, we're gonna bring it all together. Maybe you sit down and have a conversation, build models, talk about what are some ideas you've talked about but haven't tried yet. What are some things that you've noticed along the way? What do you know now? What questions do we still have? And then you can find ways to extend that learning. So maybe you use sticks and clay and rocks and build mini models and test that out with different weights and different things. Maybe they pick one scenario and draw a picture of it to then be able to tell the story of what they were learning and experiencing along the way. They can invite other students into the experience to show and share the learning that they had along the way. This can help them process. This can help them transfer their knowledge over to other students. And then inevitably you're going to be talking about what did you try, what did you notice, and then to tell that story. Maybe there's a circle time where the students who are experimenting and playing got to tell the story of what they did and what they tried. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to share it with the parents or make a digital story that is then communicated to the parents. And now let's connect it directly back to STEM. So the science of that whole teeter-totter example, the kids were making predictions. They were trying things out. They were doing trial and error. So they tried to balance the log. They weren't able to be successful. What could we change? What could we do differently to try and balance it in this situation? And then coming to conclusions. With technology, you might use a camera, again, to document what's happening, to show the students what is happening and what they're doing. You might use a ruler, and in the forest, a ruler might just be a stick to measure how far off the ground the log is or how long one side of the log is compared to the other side. And those are opportunities to incorporate math. So there's also engineering. They're manipulating loose parts. They're building things. They're creating. They're crafting. They're solving this problem. How do we balance this teeter-totter? And then with math, there's a lot of opportunity to talk about weight, balance, counting. All right, and now Kit is going to take over.
So Sarah spent a little bit of time there in that example, taking you through the process of inquiry-based learning and then breaking it down into the different elements. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time trying to give you an example of how wonder really propels the learning that goes on in our Forest Grove classroom, in the hopes that you can take something from this example and apply it to your own classroom. And what I really hope you're able to kind of take away from this is to not get too caught up in identifying each of the discrete areas and making sure you're attending to all of them in every moment, because it's really the integrated aspect of STEM that makes it so successful and so compelling. When we're thinking about what we're trying to do with STEM in a more abstract way, we're trying to engage children dynamically with the world around them and help them engage in critical thinking and problem solving. So from my experience, I think what the secret ingredient here that sort of brings it all together is really a child's sense of wonder. Wonder comes alive in nature because the natural environment is dynamic. It's constantly changing, and therefore it's impossible to know exactly what to expect. And that's a powerful thing for kids. To wonder means to be astonished, it's to admire or magnify, but it's also, inherent in the idea of wonder is doubt and curiosity. Typically when we use the word wonder or hear wonder, it's used reflexively. I wonder. There's an empowering element in the act of wonder that's really critical. When a child has a sense of wonder, when they're keyed in by their sense of wonder, when they engage in that act of wonder, their senses are honed by their innate inquisitiveness, and the mysteries of the world around them become magnified. When children wonder, they're empowered to learn and engage with the world in a way that's sustainable because it's internally rather than externally driven. To wonder is to encounter the unknown and become enthralled by it, and that's why when we're out in nature or the outdoors, our sense of wonder truly comes alive. That same element of the unknown is also why wonder is so compelling and why it inspires the kind of critical thinking that's essential to effectively engage kids in STEM learning. I really think that the best part of using wonder sort of as a tool in the classroom to drive this sort of learning is that it doesn't require any particular set of materials or prior knowledge. It's really using what's at your disposal and being open to perceiving how much is there in the environment. I think the important thing that we need to do as teachers more than anything else is to cultivate a sense of wonder in ourselves so that we can in turn model it in the kids. When I'm excited, when I want to wonder about the world, when I engage in that way, the children's faces light up and they immediately reflect that back to me. And so in the morning for me, that means putting aside my curricular goals, any concerns I have about skill development, and really just approaching the environment around me as openly and unabashedly as possible, looking for possibility, for opportunity, under logs, behind things. I'm noticing sounds, I'm noticing smells, I'm really trying to key in what's there that maybe I don't understand. And how can I convey that to the kids? How can I convey that there's a mystery there and that there's something for us to uncover? And so each morning when I'm up in our Forest Grove setting up the classroom, it's really in an almost kind of meditative state. I'm setting out the materials, but I try to let my cognitive engagement kind of subside and my senses are guiding what I'm doing. I'm looking around for things that might spark a child's sense of wonder, for clues. I like to call them mysteries because that's really compelling for the kids. So I might find a leaf with an interesting markings on the back or tunneling from an insect or a bite taken out of it. I might find a bit of feathers or fur or sort of a glowing fungus on the underside of a log. And when I'm doing that and noticing these things, I really try to keep my adult mind quiet. That voice that says, oh, look, those are junco feathers. I bet the Cooper's hawk was active in the classroom last night and hunting and probably pulled that off. Or, oh, look, there's some really cool witch's butter growing on that log. Because I want I want to approach it with as much openness and as much possibility as possible so that I can really reflect that to the kids and encourage them to do the same. Rote memorization is not what we're looking for here. We're looking for a real dynamic engagement with the environment. We're looking for critical thinking. We're looking for opportunity and possibility. It's the joy of unraveling the mystery of the thing that matters the most. And that's what's really compelling. It's helping, it's that process of unraveling the mystery that is what requires all of the kids' faculties, the physical, the social, the emotional, and the cognitive. And that's what sustains their focus over an extended period of time and keeps them coming back day after day and noticing changes, coming to conclusions. And that's what allows us to teach them in a truly integrated way. So one of my favorite examples of this sort of wonder-driven STEM learning in our classroom is the relationship that the children develop each year with our resident barred owls. There you saw a couple of children. The last slide we had Mira and Colin looking at some owl bones some bones they had collected from an owl pellet. And so we do at the Arboretum, we have a pair of resident barred owls. And around mid-spring, I'll start to notice and store in the back of my mind these clues or mysteries that I've identified around the classroom indicating their increased presence. It might be the white spray of their droppings, a tuft of fur, a feather, a pellet. And I'll sort of store these away, and then over a period of days or weeks, that I'll be thinking about it and either independently or with my support as we go exploring and adventuring through the classroom, the children will start to notice these things. And whenever possible, rather than pointing these things out directly myself, I'll try to guide the children to notice the specimens on their own, so that they're feeling empowered and driven in that sense to drive the process of engagement independently. And I think maybe what is most important is that first moment of discovery when they come across something really exciting. Here's Milo with his owl pellet that he's discovered. So maybe it's an owl pellet, maybe it's just that tuft of fur. And my response is always really big and over the top. Wow, that's incredible. Look at what you found. What do you think that is? How did it get there? This is the foundation for the children's scientific thinking and inquiry. We want to know, what is the forest telling us? What is the story behind this, this leaf or this feather? And that's really, every day when we're outside in the woods, that is really what we're doing. We're trying to uncover the story that exists in everything. That's what I love about the outdoor environment. Every single piece of the outdoor environment is material for learning. So, in this example, I responded to the kids' excitement. We sort of mirrored that back and forth, and we begin developing different hypotheses. I ask the kids what they think. They'll say, I think there was a worm, and the squirrel ate the worm, and then the bird ate the squirrel, or I think the squirrel ran away into a hole, or, Milo goes, I think the squirrel spotted the owl and then ate it. He really wants to assert himself in another way. And from my perspective, the wilder the theory, the better. That shows me that the children are excited, that they're thinking creatively, that they're thinking critically, and I want them to run with that excitement. And it's an immediate follow-up. Wow, you have these questions. I wonder, what are we going to do to try to answer these questions? So once a few of the kids, I'm sure everybody's seen this. Once a few children get excited about what's going on, it spreads really quickly. So in this example here, which was from a few years ago, the entire class spent weeks scouring the classroom for surrounding clues. One of our super observant boys found a tuft of fur and was so excited that he got the whole class involved in the mystery. They started, scouring the classroom every morning for new clues. They found these owl pellets. Everyone became so excited that they were all using their perception, honing their perceptual abilities, starting to notice changes that happened each day in the environment and make, coming to assumptions, developing theories based on what they were noticing. As they found owl pellets, it was an opportunity to use tools to dissect them and to tally their finding. Their interest in this became an opportunity then to engage in engineering design process, working with tubes and basers and pumps to explore how food moves through the owl's body. The sociodramatic play at the same time also really reinforced the learning and the things that they were perceiving in the environment. They spent a lot of time observing the owls in the space and their interaction with the crows and incorporating that into their play. They act out regurgitating owl pellets. All of these things, really reinforced the learning that was going on. And I think I could go on and on about this lesson because it was such an incredible experience. The way that they followed the owls, the way they noticed the Papa Owl's pattern of being in one place in the arboretum. They started to come to conclusions about that. We discovered there was a snag nearby and that owls often build nests. They built a relationship with baby owlets. So, I mean, this was just something that started with a tuft of fur, and it grew and grew and grew. But I think what I want to convey here is that not necessarily that owls are super cool and a great opportunity for learning, but that just by noticing and paying attention to what's there in the world around you and responding to it with a sense of wonder and possibility, because that could be a rustling in the leaves, it could be a new smell, it could be just some change, something interesting. It's this asking questions. And that's what can really motivate learning in all of these different areas that we're looking to attend to when we think about STEM learning. And so you don't need to be in an arboretum in order to do this. It could be looking at ants in the sidewalk and wondering about what's going on and taking steps to act on that. So I think, above all else, that's really sort of one of those keys to take away with you when we think about how do we drive STEM learning, how do we hook kids into this process. It's that wonder, and that's what we can model, and that's what the kids learn how to mirror, and they learn how to notice and engage in that way. So we'll move on from here in the interest of time. I think we have a poll now for you.
This is a little more complicated a question. This is a question about what you find your biggest challenge in implementing STEM in your classroom is. And once again, Kit and Sarah mean to imply that whatever kind of classroom you use, indoors or outdoors, combination. So we're getting a lot of thoughtful responses here as people are chewing on this. I'm just going up. I'll give it just another few seconds to get everybody's responses, and then I'll put them out on the screen there where you can all see them. Another 10 seconds. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and interesting. I'm going to let Kit and Sarah analyze this result.
Wow, the results seem to be fairly even across the board. Content knowledge seems to be a challenge. Equipment needs is the highest, but not by much. And then teachers and resources. So the next part of this is going to hopefully help with this. It's going to give you some tips and tricks for thinking about how to incorporate STEM into your classroom. And hopefully we'll get to cover some things that might give you some ideas. So first and foremost, we do understand that not everybody has a forest to be in to inspire that wonder, but that doesn't mean some of these things can't. That doesn't mean STEM and inspired by wonder can't happen anywhere, no matter where you are working with children. First and foremost, we think that attitude is a really key part of implementing STEM in your classroom. If you're excited and confident about aspects that you're experiencing that are science, technology, engineering, and math, if you can be confident and excited about those topics, then your kids will be too. If you're nervous about those things or unsure or uncomfortable, your students are going to pick up on that. So just being excited to be learning about and wondering about the world around you will help those students be engaged. And also, it's okay not to know. You're learning alongside your students. If you have a question and you're wondering about something you don't know the answer, that's a great way to model for those students. Hey, I found this feather. I don't know what bird this is from. I'm gonna go find a field guide. I'm gonna go look up the bird identification app on the iPad and find out what kind of bird this is. What sound does it make? Where does it live? Maybe once I know more about this feather, I can go find the bird that it came from. So as an educator, it's okay not to know, and that will help your students connect and relate to the experiences you're having together. Along with that, if you're able to be a curious, wondering, and inquisitive educator, that will help inspire your students. I know sort of one of the pillars of Fiddleheads, and we instill this in our teachers when we're training our new teachers, is that if we are wondering and being curious about the world, then our students will be too. Kit sort of talked about that idea of when she comes into the classroom, she's wondering, she's asking questions, she's turning off that part of her brain that knows everything and has answers. So if we do that, then our children will wonder and notice alongside us. And then cheer on your students. Be encouraging. When they find things and ask questions, be excited for them and with them, and encourage them to continue to ask those questions and to wonder and to find answers and to explore the world around them. And then creating an environment to promote inquiry will really set your students up for asking those questions and for building that self-motivation to take that question further so that you can incorporate science, technology, engineering, and math into their thinking and their wondering process. So whether you have an indoor and outdoor environment, you can go outside. You probably have a play yard. Maybe you have a park nearby. Maybe you have a planter box outside your classroom window. Find ways to engage with that world that's maybe right outside your window. At Fiddleheads, we have this idea, Kit introduced this concept that everything has a story. So when you find something, be it inside, outside, something you brought from outside into inside, it has a story to tell. That feather on the ground, that piece of fluff, something happened to it. So find out what that story is. Have that child want to know what that story is that they're finding. Introduce language that can help students build a STEM vocabulary that can then translate into future experiences. Think about things like sensory words, bumpy, smooth, rough, slimy, slippery, or use words that describe size, rate, color, speed, shape. Help them make comparisons, larger, smaller, greater, fewer. All of those words connect to the principles that go along with STEM. Have loose parts in your classroom, be that rocks, be that blocks, things that you bring from the outside that have no set rules or expectations. Allow them to explore how those things move, whether it be a bin of water and a whole bunch of different materials nearby that they can explore and how that works inside the water. You can bring in mysterious artifacts from outside. Anything really can be a mystery. At Fiddleheads, we're lucky enough to have horticulturalists on staff that bring us things they find. A rotting log with interesting things growing on it, a part of an animal they might have found in the forest. They bring us those things and the kids are able to wonder about them. So if you're a teacher on your walk into school or your walk from your house to your car, if you find a fascinating flower or an interesting log, bring that into your students. Have them ask questions. Have them wonder about what it is they're seeing or feeling or smelling. Set up exploration stations. So bring in a whole bunch of different materials and allow them to explore how those materials work together, what they feel like, what they sound like. All of that will inspire inquiry in students that you can then run with to create science experiments, to inspire engineering projects, to bring in technology and tools to help them answer their questions and figure out what it is they're wondering and exploring. Another important element of STEM is to document and reflect, to help kids make sense of what it is they are seeing and experiencing and wondering about. If they've asked a question, if they've designed an experiment, if they've built something along the way, they want to make sense of that. At Fiddleheads, we use nature journals in a big way. That's probably our biggest form of documenting because it's very kid-led. Every student has their own journal that they can document what they are seeing and experiencing in the forest. They can draw pictures, they can work with a teacher to write words and descriptions, and then they have a document to take home with them, something they can reflect on with parents, and for years down the road. You can use art, you can take photos, make charts and diagrams to make sense of the numbers, the math, the experiences that they're having. You can audio, you can record the stories students have to say, the things they have to tell. So find ways to help them make sense of what they're learning, and then they can use that documentation to share that with their parents, with their peers, with the other teachers, and that will continue to help them process and make sense, and then to be able to extrapolate what they're learning and what they've experienced into future experiences. So some final takeaways here. We think that STEM is all about the process, not about the product. There's no right and wrong. There's no correct answer. It's about the experience and the process these students are having along the way. We believe that the STEM should be rooted in direct experiences. So consider things that they are seeing in their classroom, in their neighborhood, in their backyard. Maybe not things that are from the Antarctic or from a time when these kids weren't alive. Think about things that they can have direct physical sensory experiences with in their world. And then the other part of STEM is we don't see them as individual buckets. It's not just a science day or technology day or a math day or an engineering day. We are doing all of these things every day with kids. And I think part of this too is finding ways to talk about how you're doing STEM in your classroom. A lot of you are probably doing all of STEM with your students, but it's identifying the ways in which students are connecting to the STEM learning process and then translating that for yourself as an educator and to teachers, to your parents, to your administrators, and tell that story of how STEM is being used in your classroom.
And just to sort of echo here and reinforce what Sarah said, I think there is no one kind of STEM learning. There's no one correct way to approach it. It's about taking this idea and making it work for you. During the workshop, we're going to be spending quite a bit more time breaking down these individual areas, connecting it to development, working on identifying how to make that work for you within your classroom, and also how to sort of differentiate approaching the discrete areas in STEM versus an integrated approach, how to deal with some of the issues that all of you indicated there in your last poll. But just going away from today, that's I think more than anything what we would like you to do is listen to what is exciting and compelling environment and run with that. And you're likely at the end of the day to have helped your students really engage in quite a bit of STEM learning. So I think we have a few minutes left for questions.
We do indeed, and so I was just going to cue you guys to turn your video on, and you're a step ahead of me. And so I'll cue everybody who's a participant. This is your opportunity to type into the chat box any question that you might have. And I've got a couple of questions that have already come in, so we'll start there, and we'll try to get to some of the other ones as they come in. The first question is from Sandrine, and she wants to know, and pardon me, I'm assuming one, but in any event, the question is, how do you manage larger groups of children? I feel this is a challenge for younger children. Their focus and attention is an issue.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that works to our greatest advantage in that sense is how absorbent children's minds are at this age. A lot of times, just as when they may be engaged in parallel play, they may be engaged in an activity, especially for our younger learners, right alongside what we're doing. And it might seem like, well, they're not actually engaging in the topic at hand. But believe it or not, what really the research is showing us is that they're absorbing that information. Even if don't seem as though they're necessarily paying attention, they're getting a lot out of those lessons. I can't tell you the number of times I've taught something or been certain that I've never given a child a lesson on something specific and then had them a few months later stand up and express to another child and sort of take them step by step through something that I had no idea that they knew. And the other thing is, I think it's okay to work in smaller groups and allow that information to sort of transpire through the classroom just by the way in which the children engage with one another and help scaffold and support each other's learning. but just sort of giving yourself the freedom to work in smaller groups and to working with kids over a period of time, over 2 or 3 years, to allow them to engage in that lesson in their own way. So it might be playing, building, sort of making cupcakes in the mud pit while another child is sort of really thinking about the composition of the soils, but they're both engaging in sort of that foundational learning that really is important for STEM.
Okay. A quick reminder, this is a question from Kathy. Again, what ages are you working with at Fiddleheads?
We work with children ages 3 to 5, but I think a lot of this information here and materials you could sort of apply 2 to 6, 2 to 7, 2 to 8.
Phyllis has a quick question also. Since your classroom's all outdoors, do you have table spaces for doing your written documentation, or what do you use as tables?
Yeah, so we've had to be very creative in that sense, I think. At the start, we didn't have much at all. But now we have quite a few. What we do is we have stumps become a great sort of open space that's reflective of the natural environment. And being in an arboretum, because the tree maintenance, we do have a regular supply of giant stumps that we can use. But really, I mean, any piece of wood or a large slate, stone.
We also utilize whiteboards and chalkboards as surfaces that can be utilized for documenting and writing.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question, and we probably won't have time for all the questions, so I'm going to try to motor through what I can here. But another question is someone who's curious about how you do nature journals with very young children. Could you introduced that topic, but talk a little bit more about how you manage it.
Yeah, so it's really about meeting the child where they are and getting them excited in the process. It's emphasizing the process over the product. It's okay. They're not necessarily going to be recording words or documenting, carefully sitting and drawing, but they might be sitting next to a peer that is, and they might have, if they have a book in front of them and they're looking at something and they're scribbling in it and they're having a conversation with themselves, maybe it's not specifically on topic, but they're play acting their way through that process. So it's okay if at 2, 3, they're not yet really thinking about their nature journaling in a more sort of complex way. We want them, even just play acting through the experience at a younger age is really important. I think that's the introduction to it. We're setting this foundation and we're building layer on layer on layer.
So another question from Heidi in this case, even though you're guiding the process, would you let a wrong answer stand?
Well, I think really at this age, again, typically the information that the children are learning, it's not necessarily something that it's very infrequent that they retain that specific knowledge for the rest of their life. If a child came to me and was concerned and had a specific question about something, I'm going to answer that question honestly. But again, the important thing is not that they get to the right answer by any means. It's that they felt that they could ask a question and take steps to answer it, and that they were empowered and excited about the process of learning. Because it's really once they get into first grade, second grade, that they're starting to engage in more memorization of facts and retaining more of that information. At this point, what we really want to be doing is getting them excited and helping them learn about how to learn more than actually the specific facts. So I would say, I think it's totally okay as long as the child came to that understanding on their own. If they felt really good about what they did, I might say, I might ask guiding questions that encourage them to think more about it. But it's okay for them to be wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong.
Okay, this is the last question. This one's actually from me because we don't have time for any more questions that have come in writing. Would you guys be amenable to responding to some of the other questioners directly via email. There's probably at least another half dozen or so right now that we haven't gotten.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. This is what we love to do, you know, other than being in the classroom with the kids, I think, and working with the families. What is so cool and exciting about this opportunity is being able to connect with you, think about, brainstorm what's going on in your classroom. We do a ton of that at Fiddleheads already, and we love doing that, so we'd be happy to.
Great. Now, I've just requested to take over to have an opportunity just to show these last couple of slides before we turn everybody loose. Okay, one of these is one that we had several questions about, which is other resources that you would recommend, and I'm presuming that this is at least some of them.
Right.
Okay. And then in addition to resources, I might note that there's some other opportunities to learn more. One of those opportunities is related to additional webinars that we've got coming up, one next week on creating outdoor spaces that encourage exploration and discovery, and then one the following week on documenting and assessing learning in the outdoors. Those webinars are like this one, 1 hour long and free. All you need to do is click on those links and register ahead of time. And then all three of these topics, today's topic as well as the two that are coming up over the next couple of weeks, are going to be featured in day-long face-to-face workshops at each of 3 sites. So Fiddleheads Forest School, for those of you who are in the Pacific Northwest or can get there, is going to be hosting each of these topics in a full day. The same is going to be true at Kalamazoo's Nature's Way Preschool, that's in Michigan. And then on the East Coast, or the Mid-Atlantic states, in the Baltimore area, the Nature Preschool at Irvine Nature Center is going to be hosting them as well. I'm not going to read all the dates and times here. Once again, you will be able to download this entire presentation if you want, because it's all been taped, and you'll be getting that email sent to you. These workshops, I might mention, the full day workshops are $129 each, or a package of 3 for a discounted rate. And we have a discount in association with this webinar as well. So if you register for these, either one workshop or a package of 3, sometime in the next week, you can get a 15% discount by using that code. Okay, the final thing I think that I wanted to say is that, and all this stuff is covered at the naturalstart.org/training, all the details. I've asked Kristen of the Natural Start Alliance to post a couple of links on the chat page. So if you look in your chat box and you're ready to, you may just want to copy and paste to a document a couple of links, and those links one is to a certificate that you can get if you need or want a certificate showing that you participated in today's webinar. There's a link for that, and there's also a link to a quick follow-up survey. I think there's 3 or 4 questions altogether that we would like you to take for us. Give us a little bit of feedback. We certainly appreciate the fact that all of you joined us today. We hope to see some of you at least at the full day workshops coming up between now and June. And we also hope to see your names listed again at next week's webinar and the following week's webinar. And a special thank you, Sarah, to you and to Kit for a really great overview of a very important topic today. Once again, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
Okay, goodbye everybody.